There's a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that the people she's loved most have been taking her for granted all along. For me, Anna Washington, that moment came at Gate 42 of Denver International Airport on a Tuesday morning that would change everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and my own worth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I had raised my daughter Rebecca to be strong, independent, and successful. What I didn't expect was that she would become so successful at dismissing me. At 73 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of heartbreak life could offer. I was wrong. The morning started like any other travel day. I had packed my small carry-on with care, folding each piece of clothing with the precision that comes from decades of being a mother who made sure everything was perfect for everyone else. My medications were sorted in their weekly dispenser, my travel documents organized in the leather folder Rebecca had given me for Christmas 3 years ago. I even wore the navy blue pantsuit she had complimented once, thinking it would make her smile when she saw me at the gate. My name is Anna Washington, and I need to tell you about the day my daughter taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. I'm 73 years old, a widow of 8 years, and until that Tuesday morning, I believed that family meant never having to question whether you belonged. I had been looking forward to this trip for months. Rebecca had called me in March, her voice bright with excitement as she described their planned vacation to Costa Rica. "Mom, we're finally doing it. Dave got that promotion and we're taking the kids somewhere special. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could join us?" The way she said it made it sound like the most natural thing in the world, like I was already part of their plans, not an afterthought being graciously included. For weeks, I researched Costa Rica. I bought new clothes, updated my passport, and even started taking Spanish lessons online. The anticipation gave me something to look forward to, something to break up the quiet routine of my days. Since my husband Walter passed, the house had felt too big, too silent. This trip felt like a bridge back to feeling like I mattered to someone. I arrived at the airport 2 hours early, as I always do. Old habits from raising children, I suppose. Rebecca had texted me the night before with our gate information and flight details. "See you at Gate 42, Mom. Flight leaves at 10:45 a.m. Simple. Clear. I felt that familiar flutter of excitement as I made my way through security, thinking about spending time with my grandchildren, seeing Rebecca relax for once, maybe even having some meaningful conversations during those long flights. Gate 42 was already bustling with travelers when I arrived. I found a seat with a good view of the boarding area and settled in with my book, glancing up occasionally to watch for Rebecca and her family. The morning sun streamed through the terminal windows, and I felt genuinely happy for the first time in months. At 9:30, I spotted them. Rebecca was walking briskly, her husband Dave pulling their large suitcase behind him, while their 2 children, Emma and Michael, trailed behind with their backpacks. Rebecca looked polished as always, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early morning, her travel outfit coordinated in shades of cream and gold. She had always been beautiful, my Rebecca, but there was something different about her demeanor that morning. Something I couldn't quite identify. I stood up and waved, expecting the usual rush of hugs and excited chatter. Instead, Rebecca approached me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, hi, we need to talk." Those 4 words sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the airport air conditioning. Dave was avoiding my gaze, suddenly very interested in checking his phone. The children gave me quick hugs, but they seemed distracted, not their usual enthusiastic selves. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light even as my stomach began to knot. Rebecca glanced around the busy gate area, then back at me. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but there's been a change of plans. We can't take you with us on this trip." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my knees weaken. "What do you mean? I don't understand. We've been planning this for months." "I know, and I feel terrible about it, but Dave's boss decided to join us at the last minute, and it's turned into more of a business trip. It wouldn't be appropriate for you to be there." Rebecca's words came out in a rush, as if she had rehearsed them, but still couldn't make them sound convincing. I looked at Dave, hoping for some clarification, some explanation that would make this make sense. He finally met my eyes for a split second before looking away again. "Sorry, Anna. Company policy stuff. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was. What I knew was that my daughter was lying to me. In all my years of experience reading people, of navigating the complexities of human relationships, I could tell when someone was being dishonest. The set of Rebecca's shoulders, the way she kept touching her earring, the fact that she wouldn't hold eye contact for more than a second. These were all tells I recognized from when she was a teenager trying to explain why she was late for curfew. "Rebecca, honey, if there's a problem, we can work it out. I could stay in a different hotel or—" "Mom, no, it's already decided. I'm really sorry, but you need to go home." Her voice had taken on that sharp edge I remembered from her teenage years, the tone that meant the discussion was over whether I liked it or not. I stood there in the middle of Gate 42, surrounded by the noise and bustle of travelers, feeling like I was disappearing right before my own eyes. The excitement I had felt just moments before curdled into something much darker. Humiliation. Rejection. The kind of deep, bone-deep hurt that comes from being discarded by someone you thought loved you unconditionally. "But I've already paid for everything," I said quietly, hating how small my voice sounded. "The hotel, the activities, We'll figure that out later," Rebecca interrupted, glancing impatiently at the departure board. "Look, they're about to start boarding. We really need to go." Emma, who is 12 and has always been perceptive, tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why can't Grandma Anna come with us? You said she was excited about seeing the monkeys." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "Emma, go sit with your father. This is grown-up business." I knelt down to Emma's level, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "It's okay, sweetheart. Grandma has some things to take care of at home anyway. You have a wonderful time and take lots of pictures for me, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly, and I could see in her young face that she knew something wasn't right but didn't understand what. Michael, who is 9, was already engrossed in his tablet, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. The boarding announcement crackled over the loudspeaker. "Now boarding Flight 447 to San Jose, Costa Rica. We'll begin with our first class, passengers and those requiring special assistance." Rebecca's face brightened immediately. "That's us. Dave, get the bags." I watched in stunned disbelief as my daughter gathered her family, preparing to board the plane without me. Without another word, without even a proper goodbye. "Rebecca, wait!" I called out, my voice stronger now despite the tears threatening to spill over. "Is this really how you want to leave things? Is this how you want your children to remember this moment?" She turned back to me, and for just a second, I saw a flicker of something that might have been guilt cross her face. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. But this is just how it has to be. I'll call you when we get back." And with that, she was gone. My daughter, my only child, the person I had sacrificed everything for, walked away from me without looking back. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, ushered her family down the jetway, and disappeared from my sight. I stood there for a long time after their plane pushed back from the gate. Other passengers came and went. Other families reunited and separated. Other lives continued moving forward while mine felt completely frozen. The woman at the gate counter kept glancing at me with concern, probably wondering why this elderly woman was standing alone in the departure area, looking like she had just witnessed a tragedy. In many ways, I had. The walk back through the airport was the longest of my life. Every step felt like an admission of failure, of not being important enough, of not mattering to the person who mattered most to me. I passed other travelers hurrying to catch their flights, saw families embracing, watched couples holding hands as they navigated the terminal together. Each scene was a reminder of what I didn't have, what I had just lost. When I finally made it back to the main terminal, I sat down heavily in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs near the baggage claim. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone to call a taxi, but as I scrolled through my contacts, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and immediate, but it was being joined by something else, something that felt like anger, but cleaner, more purposeful. As I sat there in the airport, watching other people's lives unfold around me, I realized that Rebecca had made a fundamental mistake. She assumed that because I was her mother, because I was older, because I had always been there for her, that I would simply accept this treatment. She assumed that I would go home, nurse my wounds in private, and be ready to pretend nothing had happened when she decided to call me again. She assumed wrong. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt something I had almost forgotten. I was capable of feeling. Resolve. Not the quiet, steady resolve of a mother doing what needed to be done for her family, but the fierce, uncompromising resolve of a woman who had finally reached her limit. I scrolled past the taxi company's number in my phone and kept looking until I found what I was looking for. A number I hadn't called in months, but one I knew by heart. Peterson Aviation Services. A professional voice answered on the second ring. "This is Anna Washington," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I need to book a flight to Chicago, immediately." "Of course, Mrs. Washington. Will this be the usual aircraft?" "Yes, and please have them file a flight plan for departure within the hour." "Certainly. Will there be any other passengers today?" I thought about Rebecca's shocked face, about the way she had dismissed me so casually, about the years of being taken for granted that had led to this moment. "No," I said firmly, "just me. And please ask them to prepare the cabin for a working flight. I'll need the table set up and the communication systems ready. I have some important calls to make." As I hung up the phone and gathered my things, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Power. Not the kind that comes from money or position, but the kind that comes from finally deciding you've had enough of being treated as less than you are. Rebecca thought she was discarding her burdensome mother at the airport gate. What she had actually done was force me to remember who Anna Washington really was beneath all those years of putting everyone else first. She was about to find out that some lessons are harder to learn than others, and that some people are much more dangerous when they've been pushed too far. The announcement for their flight's departure echoed through the terminal as I walked toward the private aviation section of the airport. Rebecca was probably settling into her first-class seat right about now, maybe even feeling relieved that she didn't have to deal with her mother's presence on what she had planned as her perfect family vacation. But they didn't know what I was capable of. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. As I approached the sleek glass doors that led to the private aviation terminal, I caught my reflection in the glass. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who had arrived at Gate 42 full of excitement and anticipation. This woman had steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. This woman was done being dismissed. The uniformed attendant at the private terminal greeted me with the kind of respectful professionalism I had forgotten I deserved. "Good morning, Mrs. Washington. Your aircraft is ready for departure. May I assist you with your luggage?" "Thank, you?" I replied, handing over my small carry-on. And please let the pilots know that once we're airborne, I'll need complete privacy in the cabin. I have some very important business to conduct. As I walked across the tarmac toward the waiting aircraft, I thought about all the times Rebecca had made assumptions about my life, my capabilities, my resources. She saw me as her aging mother who lived quietly in the suburbs, who sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, who was always available when needed but never really considered beyond that utility. She had no idea that I had been living a carefully constructed version of myself, one designed to make her feel independent and successful. She had no idea what I was really capable of when pushed to my limits. The leather seats of the aircraft embraced me like an old friend as I settled in for the flight to Chicago. As we taxied toward the runway, I opened my phone and began scrolling through a very different set of contacts than the ones I had used for calling taxis and making dinner reservations. These were numbers that connected me to people who could change lives with a phone call. People who had been waiting for me to remember that I was more than just somebody's mother. The engines spooled up for takeoff, and I felt the familiar rush of acceleration as we left the ground. Somewhere below us, Rebecca's commercial flight was probably still waiting in the departure queue, delayed by the morning's air traffic. How fitting that I would reach my destination before she even left the ground. I had raised my daughter to be strong and independent, never realizing that in doing so, I had forgotten to remain strong and independent myself. But that morning, at Gate 42 had been a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. Some people need to lose everything to remember who they really are. Rebecca was about to learn that lesson the hard way. As Chicago's skyline came into view through the aircraft window, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. My daughter thought she had abandoned me at that airport gate, left me behind like unwanted baggage. What she had actually done was set me free. The flight to Chicago gave me time to think, really think, for the first time in months. As the Gulf Stream cut through the clouds at 35,000 feet, I found myself remembering things I had deliberately pushed aside, moments when I should have recognized the pattern forming between Rebecca and me. There was the Christmas when she had insisted on hosting dinner at her house, then spent the entire day treating me like hired help. Mom, can you watch the kids while I finish the appetizers? Mom, can you set the table? Mom, can you clean up the kitchen? Not once did she ask if I needed help, if I was tired, if I wanted to sit down and actually enjoy the holiday I had helped create. When I finally suggested that maybe we could work together on the meal, she had laughed and said, "Oh, Mom, you know I like to do things my way. Just relax and let me handle it." But relaxing had meant becoming invisible, useful only when needed. Or the time Rebecca's washing machine broke and she called me in tears. Not because she was upset about the appliance, but because she had no idea how she was going to manage without it for the week it would take to get it repaired. I had driven over immediately with my checkbook, intending to help her find a replacement. Instead, I found myself at the laundromat with 3 loads of her family's laundry while she went to her yoga class. "You're so good at this domestic stuff, Mom. I never learned how to do laundry at a laundromat." At the time, I had felt useful, needed. Looking back, I realized I had been convenient. The pattern was so clear now that I was finally willing to see it. Rebecca loved me the way people love a reliable appliance, with gratitude when it worked, with frustration when it didn't, and with the absolute assumption that it would always be there when needed. She had never seen me as a person with my own desires, my own plans, my own dignity that could be wounded. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, interrupting my thoughts. "Mrs. Washington, we're beginning our descent into Chicago. We should have you on the ground in about 20 minutes. "Thank you, Captain Miller," I replied, pressing the intercom button. "Has my car been arranged?" "Yes, ma'am. There will be a driver waiting for you at the terminal." I had been making this trip to Chicago once a month for the past 15 years, though Rebecca had no idea. She thought I spent my time playing bridge with the church ladies and tending my garden. She had no clue that I owned a 40% stake in Morrison Financial Holdings, one of the most successful investment firms in the Midwest. She didn't know that the quiet little house I lived in was paid for with cash, or that my monthly bridge games were actually board meetings conducted in the private dining room of the Drake Hotel. Walter and I had built Morrison Financial from nothing back in the 70s, when women in business were still fighting for every seat at every table. After he died, I had quietly stepped back from the day-to-day operations, but I had never stepped away from ownership. The firm's quarterly reports were delivered to my house in unmarked envelopes, and my share of the profits were deposited into accounts that Rebecca had never seen. I had chosen to live modestly not because I had to, but because I wanted Rebecca to feel successful in her own right. I wanted her to believe that her MBA from Northwestern, her marketing director position, her comfortable suburban lifestyle were all products of her own hard work and intelligence. I had thought I was giving her the gift of independence. Instead, I had given her the gift of taking me for granted. The plane touched down smoothly at Midway, and within minutes I was settling into the back seat of the black sedan that had been waiting for me. The driver, Thomas, had been picking me up for these monthly trips for years. He was one of the few people who knew both versions of Anna Washington, the quiet suburban grandmother and the sharp-eyed businesswoman who could read a profit and loss statement like others read novels. "Good to see you again, Mrs. Washington," Thomas said as he pulled away from the terminal. "Straight to Morrison Financial?" "Actually, Thomas, I need to make a stop first. Please take me to Patterson, Webb & Associates on LaSalle Street." Thomas caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "The law firm? Are you all right, ma'am? Is there anything I should be concerned about?" His genuine worry touched something in me that Rebecca's casual dismissal had bruised. "I'm fine, Thomas." "Better. Then fine, actually. I'm just finally taking care of some business that's been put off too long." The law offices of Patterson, Webb & Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Chicago's financial district. I had been coming here for various business matters for over a decade, but today felt different. Today, I wasn't here to review contracts or discuss estate planning. Today, I was here to make a point. Jonathan Patterson himself came out to greet me in the reception area, which was unusual. Normally, I worked with one of the junior partners on routine matters. But there must have been something in my voice when I called from the plane that suggested this wasn't routine. "Anna, it's wonderful to see you," Jonathan said, extending his hand. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, with the kind of silver hair that made him look like Central Casting's idea of a successful attorney. "Though I have to admit, your call intrigued me. You mentioned wanting to discuss some family financial arrangements?" "Yes," I said simply. "Is your conference room available? This may take some time." Jonathan led me down a hallway lined with oil paintings of former partners and into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. The room was designed to impress, with its mahogany table and leather chairs, but I barely noticed the decor. My focus was entirely on what I needed to accomplish. "Can I have Margaret bring you some coffee? Water?" Jonathan asked as we settled into chairs across from each other. "Coffee would be lovely, thank you." I needed the caffeine, but more than that, I needed a few moments to organize my thoughts. What I was about to set in motion would change everything between Rebecca and me, and I wanted to be absolutely certain I was making the right choice. While we waited for the coffee, Jonathan spread several manila folders across the table. "I took the liberty of pulling your files when you called. Your estate planning documents, the Morrison Financial Partnership agreements, the trust arrangements. What specifically did you want to discuss?" I accepted the steaming cup of coffee from Margaret, Jonathan's assistant, and took a careful sip before answering. The liquid was perfectly prepared, strong but not bitter, much like the resolve I was feeling. "Jonathan, I need you to help me teach my daughter a lesson about respect. And I need you to do it in a way that's completely legal, but absolutely unmistakable." He raised an eyebrow. I see. What exactly has happened? I told him about the airport, about Rebecca's casual dismissal, about the years of being treated like a convenience rather than a person. As I spoke, I could see Jonathan's expression shift from polite interest to genuine concern, to something that looked like protective anger on my behalf. How long has this pattern been going on? He asked when I finished. Years, maybe decades. I think I've been so focused on being the mother I thought she needed that I forgot to be the woman I actually am. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. What did you have in mind? I want you to prepare documents that will revoke all financial support I've been providing to Rebecca and her family. The down payment I gave them for their house, the monthly supplement to their mortgage payment, the children's private school tuition, the vacation funds, all of it. I want it stopped immediately. Anna, Jonathan said carefully, are you sure about this? Family financial disputes can become very messy, very quickly. I'm not disputing anything, I replied firmly. I'm simply choosing to stop subsidizing people who don't respect me enough to treat me with basic human decency. Jonathan made notes on a legal pad as I outlined exactly what I wanted done. The list was longer than even I had realized until I started saying it out loud. Over the years, I had been quietly supporting Rebecca's lifestyle in ways she had either forgotten about or chosen to ignore. The down payment on their house in the expensive suburb had come from me. The monthly check that allowed them to afford their mortgage payments came from me. The tuition for Emma and Michael's private school came from me. The family vacations, the new cars every few years, Rebecca's shopping habits, the children's extracurricular activities, all of it was subsidized by money from my accounts that Rebecca assumed would always be there. Jonathan, I also want you to prepare a letter explaining these changes. I want Rebecca to understand exactly what she's losing and why she's losing it. But I want the tone to be professional, not emotional. This isn't about revenge. It's about consequences. How much notice do you want to give them? Jonathan asked. I thought about Rebecca sitting in first class on her way to Costa Rica, probably not giving me a second thought now that I was no longer her problem. 30 days. That's more than enough time for them to figure out how to manage their own finances. And what about the children's education? Are you comfortable with the possibility that they might have to change schools? This was the part that hurt the most. Emma and Michael were innocent in all of this. They loved me genuinely, without agenda or expectation. But they were also Rebecca's responsibility, not mine. The children will be fine. Their parents make good salaries. They'll just have to make different choices about how they spend their money. Jonathan spent the next 2 hours drafting documents while I made phone calls from his office. First, I called my bank and instructed them to stop all automatic transfers to Rebecca's accounts. Then I called the private school and informed them that I would no longer be responsible for tuition payments after the current semester ended. Each call felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. By late afternoon, Jonathan had prepared a comprehensive packet of documents that would effectively end my financial support of Rebecca's family. The letter explaining the changes was exactly what I had requested: professional, clear, and utterly final. Anna, before you sign these, Jonathan said, I want to make sure you understand that this will likely cause significant disruption in your daughter's life. Are you prepared for the possibility that she might not forgive you for this? I thought about that morning at the airport, about the casual cruelty with which Rebecca had dismissed me, about all the times over the years when she had treated me like an inconvenience rather than a person, about the conversations we should have had but never did, because she was always too busy or too distracted or too sure that I would always be there no matter how she treated me. Jonathan, I've spent the last 8 years since Walter died trying to be the perfect mother and grandmother. I've put Rebecca's wants and needs ahead of my own dignity. I've made myself small so she could feel big, And this morning, she left me standing alone at an airport gate like I was baggage she didn't want to carry. I picked up Jonathan's Mont Blanc pen and signed my name to each document with steady hands. If she can't forgive me for expecting to be treated with respect by my own daughter, then maybe forgiveness isn't what this relationship needs. Maybe it needs honesty. Jonathan gathered the signed documents and placed them in a manila envelope. These will be couriered to her house tomorrow morning. She'll receive them before she returns from Costa Rica. Good. I want her to have time to think about things before she calls me. Because she will call me, probably screaming. And what will you say to her? I stood up and smoothed my skirt, feeling more like myself than I had in years. I'll tell her the truth. That love without respect isn't love at all. It's just convenient exploitation. As Thomas drove me back to the airport, I watched Chicago's skyline fade in the distance. In a few hours, I would be back in my quiet house, surrounded by the carefully maintained illusion of my simple life. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the woman who would accept being dismissed by her own daughter. I was no longer the woman who would prioritize keeping peace over keeping her dignity. The flight home gave me time to think about what came next. Rebecca would receive the documents tomorrow, probably while she was still in Costa Rica. She would spend the rest of her vacation trying to figure out how to manage without my financial support. She would realize, perhaps for the first time, exactly how much of her comfortable lifestyle depended on my quiet generosity, and then she would call me. I found myself looking forward to that conversation in a way that surprised me. For years, our phone calls had been superficial exchanges of pleasantries and logistics. Rebecca updating me on the children's activities, telling me about work stress, asking for advice she never intended to take. I listened and supported and agreed, because that's what mothers do. But that woman, the agreeable mother who never made waves, had been left behind at gate 42 that morning. The woman coming home from Chicago was someone different. Someone who had remembered that she had power and choices and the absolute right to be treated with dignity by the people she loved. As the plane began its descent, I realized that Rebecca had done me an enormous favor by abandoning me at that airport gate. She had forced me to remember who Anna Washington really was beneath all those years of selfless motherhood. She had reminded me that I was more than just somebody's mother or grandmother. I was a woman who had built a successful business from nothing, a woman who had navigated the male-dominated world of finance in the 1970s and 1980s and emerged victorious. A woman who had raised a daughter as a single mother after Walter's death, while simultaneously running a multi-million-dollar company. Somehow, in my effort to give Rebecca space to be successful in her own right, I had forgotten to be successful in mine. That was going to change. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in months without that underlying anxiety that had become so familiar I had stopped noticing it. The anxiety of wondering when Rebecca would need something, when the next crisis would require my intervention, when I would be called upon to solve problems that weren't mine to solve. Instead, I felt calm, purposeful, free. I made myself a proper breakfast, not the quick coffee and toast I usually grabbed on my way to handle someone else's emergency, but eggs Benedict with fresh hollandaise sauce and real orange juice squeezed. From oranges I had bought because I liked them, not because they were on sale or because someone else preferred them. At exactly 9:00 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Morrison Financial Holdings. "Anna, it's David Morrison," came the familiar voice of my business partner's son, who had taken over much of the day-to-day operations when his father retired. "I hope you don't mind me calling so early, but we've had an interesting development." "What kind of development?" I asked, settling into my favorite chair with my second cup of coffee. "The Hartwell Group wants to meet with us about a potential merger. It would be a significant expansion of our client base, but they're insisting on meeting with all the major partners. That includes you, Anna. They want to meet the woman behind 40% of Morrison Financial." I smiled. How refreshing. When do they want to meet? Next week, if possible. I know you've been keeping a lower profile recently, but David, that lower profile was a choice, not a necessity. Schedule the meeting. It's time for Anna Washington to step back into the light. After I hung up, I sat in my living room looking around at the carefully maintained modesty of my surroundings. The furniture was comfortable but not expensive. The artwork was pleasant but not valuable. Everything about my home was designed to project the image of a widow living on a modest fixed income. But that image had served its purpose. Rebecca was independent now, successful in her own career, financially stable in her own right. Or at least she had been until yesterday, when I had removed the safety net she didn't know she was using. It was time for me to stop hiding who I really was. I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls, reactivating parts of my life that I had put on hold. I called my personal shopper at Nordstrom and scheduled an appointment to update my wardrobe. I called my real estate agent and asked her to start looking for a penthouse apartment in the downtown area. I called my financial advisor and asked him to prepare a complete portfolio review. Anna Washington was coming out of retirement. By noon, I had transformed my quiet Tuesday morning into a day of major life changes. It felt exhilarating in a way I had almost forgotten was possible. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not on what would be most convenient for someone else. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rebecca. Having an amazing time. In Costa Rica. The resort is incredible. Thanks for understanding about the trip, Mom. Talk soon. I stared at the message for a long time. The casual dismissal, the complete lack of awareness about how her behavior had affected me, the assumption that I was fine with being discarded because it was convenient for her. Rebecca had no idea that her entire financial world was about to shift dramatically. But she would know soon enough. I deleted the text without responding and went back to planning my new life. The life of a woman who had finally remembered that she deserved better than being taken for granted by the people who claimed to love her most. The documents arrived at Rebecca's house on Thursday morning, just as I had planned. I knew this, because I had specifically requested delivery confirmation from the courier service. At 10:47 a.m., someone at 1247 Maple Grove Lane had signed for an envelope containing the most important wake-up call of my daughter's adult life. I spent that Thursday in a remarkably productive state of mind. I had an appointment with Sarah Chen, my personal shopper at Nordstrom, who seemed genuinely delighted to hear from me after months of dormancy. We spent 3 hours selecting a wardrobe that reflected who I actually was rather than who I had been pretending to be. Gone were the conservative cardigans and sensible flats that screamed harmless grandmother. In their place, we chose tailored. Blazers in rich jewel tones, silk blouses that draped elegantly, and shoes with enough heel to remind people that I was a force to be reckoned with. Mrs. Washington, if you don't mind me saying so, you seem different today, Sarah observed as she helped me select a stunning navy blue dress that probably cost more than Rebecca thought I spent on clothing in an entire year. More confident. More yourself, if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense, I replied, admiring how the dress fit my 73-year-old figure with the kind of elegance that comes from quality construction and expert tailoring. I've been hiding my light under a bushel for far too long. It's time to let it shine again. That afternoon, I had lunch with Margaret Henley, my real estate agent at the Four Seasons. Margaret had been handling discrete property transactions for me for years, managing the rental properties I owned downtown while maintaining the fiction that I was just another suburban retiree living on Social Security and Walter's modest pension. Anna, I have to ask, Margaret said over her Cobb salad. What's prompted this sudden interest in upgrading your living situation? The properties I've shown you are quite different from your current home. I took a sip of my Chardonnay and considered how much to reveal. Let's just say I've recently realized that I've been living beneath my means for reasons that are no longer relevant. Margaret nodded knowingly. She had been in real estate long enough to recognize when clients were making life changes driven by more than simple preference. "Well, whatever the reason, I think you'll love the penthouse at Millennium Towers. It's just come on the market, and it has the kind of sophisticated elegance that I think would suit you perfectly." The penthouse was everything I hadn't allowed myself to want for the past 8 years. Floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the city skyline, a kitchen designed for someone who actually enjoyed cooking rather than just heating up, casseroles for church potlucks, and a master suite that felt like a luxury hotel rather than the spare bedroom I had been camping in since Walter's death. "The current owners are motivated sellers," Margaret explained as we stood on the terrace, looking out over the carefully manicured grounds. "They're relocating to Europe for business. I think we could negotiate a very favorable price if you're serious about making an offer." "I'm serious," I said without hesitation. "Draw up the paperwork. I want to make a cash offer today." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly, but she was too professional to comment on my apparent ability to make a cash offer on a $2 million penthouse. "Of course, I'll have the contracts ready for your review by tomorrow morning." As I drove home that evening, I felt a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with new clothes or new living arrangements. Rebecca and her family were scheduled to return from Costa Rica on Friday evening. By Saturday morning, she would have had time to review the documents that had been delivered to her house. By Saturday afternoon, my phone would ring. I found myself genuinely curious about what she would say. Would she be angry, confused? Would she try to negotiate or simply demand an explanation? Rebecca had always been articulate when she wanted something, and she definitely wanted my financial support to continue. The question was whether she understood that wanting something and deserving it were not the same thing. Friday passed quietly. I spent the morning at Morrison Financial, meeting with David Morrison and the senior staff to discuss the upcoming merger negotiations. Walking back into that conference room felt like coming home after a long exile. These people had known the real Anna Washington all along. They had never needed me to diminish myself to make them comfortable. "Anna, I have to say, it's good to have you back in a more active role," said Patricia Valdez, our head of client relations. "Your insights on the Hartwell proposal are exactly what we needed to hear." I should never have stepped back as far as I did, I admitted. Personal circumstances led me to believe that taking a lower profile was necessary, but those circumstances have changed. "Well, whatever brought you back, we're grateful," David added. "The Hartwell people specifically requested to meet with you after reviewing our partnership structure. They're impressed by the stability you've brought to the firm over the years." That afternoon, I had my hair done at the salon I had been avoiding for months because the appointment seemed too indulgent for a woman who was supposed to be living modestly. Francine, my longtime stylist, was thrilled to see me. "Anna, darling, where have you been hiding? I've missed our monthly appointments," she said, as she worked her magic on my silver hair, shaping it into a style that was sophisticated. Without being severe, "You look like you've been keeping yourself locked away from the world." "In a way, I have been," I replied, watching the transformation in the mirror. "But that's changing." "Good. You're too vital to waste time being invisible." By Friday evening, I was back in my modest suburban house, but I felt like a different person. The conservative clothes were hanging in my closet, replaced by outfits that reflected my actual station in life. My hair was styled in a way that commanded respect, rather than inviting condescension. My nails were manicured, my skin was glowing, from the facial I had treated myself to, and my confidence was restored to levels I hadn't experienced in years. I made myself a martini, perfectly dry with 3 olives, and settled into my favorite chair to wait. Rebecca's flight was scheduled to land at 7:30 p.m. By the time they collected their luggage, navigated airport traffic, and settled back into their house, it would be close to 10 p.m. She would probably wait until the children were in bed before opening the envelope that had been waiting for her all week. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes everything seem possible. I had breakfast on my back patio, reading the financial section of the Chicago Tribune and enjoying the kind of leisurely morning I hadn't allowed myself in years. My phone remained silent until exactly 10:15 a.m. The caller ID showed Rebecca's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering, a small psychological advantage that Walter had taught me decades ago in business negotiations. Never appear too eager, even when you're expecting the call. "Hello, Rebecca," I said calmly. "Mom, what the hell is this?" Her voice was sharp with an edge of panic I hadn't heard since she was a teenager who had just been caught lying about her whereabouts. "What are these documents? What's this letter supposed to mean?" "Which part confused you, sweetheart? I thought Jonathan did an excellent job of explaining everything clearly." "Don't sweetheart me, Mom. Are you seriously telling me that you're cutting off all financial support? The house payments, the school tuition, everything?" I took a sip of my coffee and kept my voice level. "That's exactly what I'm telling you. Effective 30 days from the date on those documents." "But Mom, you can't we depend on that money. You know our budget. You know what our expenses are." "Yes, I do know your expenses, Rebecca. I know them because I've been paying for most of them. What I don't understand is why a successful marketing director with an MBA from Northwestern and a husband who's a senior engineer can't manage to live within their means." There was a long pause. I could almost hear Rebecca's mind working, trying to figure out what approach would be most effective. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to the tone she used when she wanted to convince me of something. "Mom, look, I know you're upset about the Costa Rica thing. I get that. And maybe we could have handled it better, but this is such an extreme reaction. We're talking about Emma and Michael's education here. We're talking about our home." "We're talking about your home and your children's education," I corrected. "These are your responsibilities, not mine." "I'm 73 years old, Rebecca. When exactly did you plan to stop depending on my financial support?" "It's not that we're depending on you," Rebecca said quickly. "It's just that you offered to help, and we appreciate it. And I offered to help you get established after college. That was 20 years ago. At what point does help become enabling?" Another pause. I could hear voices in the background, probably Dave asking what was happening, the children wondering why their mother was on the phone so early on a Saturday morning. "Mom, can we please talk about this in person? This is the kind of conversation we should be having face-to-face, not over the phone. Of course. When would you like to meet?" "How about this afternoon? We could have lunch somewhere nice, just the two of us. Talk this through like adults." I almost laughed at that. Rebecca wanted to meet at a restaurant because she assumed that I wouldn't make a scene in public. She thought she could manage me better in a controlled environment, where she could use her considerable charm and persuasive abilities to convince me to change my mind. "Actually, Rebecca, I think this conversation should happen at your house. I'd like to see the home that I've been helping to pay for all these years." "Our house? But Mom, the kids will be here, and it's perfectly appropriate. This affects the entire family, doesn't it? Emma and Michael should understand what's happening." "You want to discuss our private financial business in front of my children?" "I want to discuss the fact that their grandmother has been subsidizing their lifestyle without any acknowledgement or appreciation, and that this arrangement is ending. I think that's something they should hear directly from me rather than learning about it through whatever explanation you choose to give them." I could hear Rebecca's breathing getting faster. She was realizing that this conversation wasn't going to go the way she had planned. "Mom, what has gotten into you? This isn't like you at all." "This is exactly like me, Rebecca. This is who I've always been. You've just never bothered to notice because the version of me that you prefer is more convenient for you." What is that supposed to mean? "It means that you've spent so many years thinking of me as your aging mother, who exists primarily to support your life, that you've forgotten I'm actually a person with my own thoughts, feelings, and limits. And you reached my limit on Tuesday morning at gate 42. Mom, I explained about that. Dave's boss joining the trip changed everything. It wasn't personal. Everything about it was personal, Rebecca. The way you dismissed me, the way you lied to me, the way you walked away without a backward glance. But most of all, the way you assumed I would just accept it and be available for the next time you needed something. I wasn't lying. Of course you were lying. Dave's boss didn't join your trip. I know this because I called the resort yesterday. You're registered as a family of 4 with no additional guests. You lied to me because telling me the truth would have required you to admit that you simply didn't want me there. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she had hung up. Finally, Rebecca spoke, and her voice was smaller, less certain. Mom, why would you call the resort? Because I wanted to understand what had really happened. Because I needed to know if my daughter had looked me in the eye and lied to me, or if there was some other explanation I was missing. It wasn't supposed to be a lie. We really did think it would be better if it was just us this time. The kids have been so busy with school and activities, and Dave's been stressed about work, and we thought it would be good to have some family time without your burdensome mother? That's not what I was going to say. But it's what you meant. Rebecca, do you have any idea how much money I've given you over the years? Any idea at all? Mom, I don't want to talk about money. Of course you don't. You never want to talk about money unless you need more of it. But we're going to talk about it now because you need to understand what you're losing and why. I opened the folder that had been sitting on my coffee table since Thursday afternoon. Jonathan had provided me with a comprehensive breakdown of every financial transaction between my accounts and Rebecca's over the past 15 years. The down payment on your house was $40,000. I've been supplementing your mortgage payments by $1,200 a month for the past 10 years. That's another $144,000. Emma and Michael's private school tuition has cost me $68,000 so far. The family vacations I've funded, the car payments I've helped with, the emergency funds for unexpected expenses, the wedding gift that paid for your honeymoon. Rebecca, over the past 15 years, I have given you and your family over $400,000. Mom, we never asked for. You didn't ask because you didn't have to ask. You knew I would always say yes. You knew I would always find a way to help because that's what mothers do. But you know what daughters are supposed to do? They're supposed to appreciate that help. They're supposed to acknowledge it. They're supposed to treat the people who love them with basic respect and consideration. We do appreciate it. Of course we appreciate it. Really? When was the last time you thanked me for anything beyond a birthday gift or a Christmas present? When was the last time you acknowledged that your comfortable lifestyle is built on my financial support? When was the last time you made a decision about your spending with any consideration for the fact that I'm the one making it possible? Rebecca was crying now. I could hear it in her voice, the tremulous quality that meant she was finally understanding. That this wasn't a negotiation she was going to win with charm or manipulation. Mom, please. You're scaring me. This isn't who you are. This is exactly who I am. I'm a woman who built a successful business from nothing. I'm a woman who raised a daughter while running a company and managing investments and making decisions that affected dozens of employees and hundreds of clients. I'm a woman who has been pretending to be smaller and quieter and less capable than I actually am because I thought it would help you feel more confident in your own accomplishments. I don't understand what you're talking about. I know. You don't. That's the problem. Rebecca, do you know what I do with my time when I'm not taking care of your emergencies, or babysitting your children, or solving your problems? You play bridge with the church ladies. You tend your garden. You volunteer at the library. I own 40% of Morrison Financial Holdings. I serve on the board of directors of 3 charitable foundations. I manage a portfolio of rental properties downtown that generates more income in a month than you and Dave make in a year. The bridge games are board meetings. The volunteer work at the library is fundraising for their capital campaign. And the garden is just a garden because I actually enjoy growing things. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if Rebecca had fainted. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Mom, that's impossible. You live in that little house, you drive that old car, you shop at Target for your clothes. I live in that house because it's convenient and comfortable, not because I can't afford better. I drive that car because it's reliable, and I don't need to impress anyone with my vehicle choices. I shop at Target because I've been trying to model modest living for my daughter, who I thought needed to learn the value of money. But if you have all this money, why didn't you ever tell me? Because you never asked. Because you were so busy taking what I gave you that you never wondered where it came from. Because you assumed that my only purpose in life was to support yours. That's not true, isn't it? Rebecca, when was the last time you asked me about my life? About my interests, my goals, my dreams? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing, not because you needed something? I waited for an answer that didn't come. When was the last time you invited me to anything because you wanted my company, not because you needed a babysitter? When was the last time you treated me like a person whose feelings could be hurt? Mom, I love you. You know I love you. I know you love the version of me that's convenient for you. The grandmother who's always available, the emergency fund that never runs dry, the problem solver who never creates problems of her own. But you don't love me, Rebecca, because you don't actually know me. That's not fair. What's not fair? Is spending 15 years being taken for granted by my own daughter. What's not fair is being abandoned at an airport gate because my presence might be inconvenient. What's not fair is discovering that the person I sacrificed everything for doesn't think I'm worth basic courtesy and respect. You didn't sacrifice everything for me. Didn't I? Do you think I wanted to spend my 60s pretending to be a helpless widow? Do you think I enjoyed making myself small so you could feel big? Do you think it was easy to watch you succeed and take credit for achievements that were built on my financial foundation? I never asked you to do that. You never asked me not to. You never questioned why your lifestyle was so much more comfortable than your income should have allowed. You never wondered how a marketing director and an engineer could afford a $500,000 house and private school tuition and annual vacations to Europe. We work hard for what we have. You work hard, yes, but what you have was made possible by me. And on Tuesday morning, you made it clear that despite everything I've given you, I'm still disposable when it's convenient for you. Mom, please, let me come over. Let me explain properly. This is all coming out wrong over the phone. What would you like to explain, Rebecca? How abandoning me at the airport was actually an act of love. How lying to me about the reason was for my own. Good? How taking $400,000 from me over the years was really doing me a favor. I want to explain that I'm sorry, that I know I hurt you and that I want to make it right. And how exactly do you plan to make it right? We can talk about it. We can figure something out. Maybe we can set up a different arrangement for the financial stuff, something that feels more fair to you. Rebecca, this isn't about finding a different arrangement. This is about you learning to take responsibility for your own life. You're 43 years old. It's time for you to stop depending on your mother to subsidize your choices. But the kids' school, the house payment, are your responsibility. You and Dave are both college-educated professionals with good jobs. You can figure out how to manage your finances without my help. What if we can't? What if we have to sell the house? What if the kids have to change schools? Then you'll deal with those consequences the way millions of other families deal with them. You'll make hard choices and adjust your lifestyle and learn to live within your means. You're really going to do this? You're really going to cut us off completely? I'm going to stop enabling you, yes. I'm going to stop pretending that giving you money is the same thing as giving you love. And I'm going to stop accepting treatment that I wouldn't tolerate from a stranger, much less from my own daughter. Mom, what do you want from me? What do I have to do to fix this? It was the first question she had asked that suggested she might finally be beginning to understand that this wasn't a problem money could solve. I want you to understand who I really am. I want you to acknowledge what I've given you over the years and what that meant to me. I want you to apologize not just for Tuesday morning, but for the pattern of disrespect that led to Tuesday morning. And I want you to prove that you can treat me like a person whose feelings matter, not just a resource to be managed. And if I do all that, you'll change your mind about the money? Rebecca, this isn't a negotiation. I'm not withholding money to punish you. I'm stopping the money because enabling your dependence on me isn't good for either of us. You need to learn to be truly independent, and I need to stop diminishing myself to maintain your comfort. So the money is gone no matter what I do. The money is gone because you're a grown woman who doesn't need her mother's financial support to live a good life. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it will have to be built on something other than what I can do for you. And what if I can't do that? What if I can't figure out how to manage without your help? Then you'll learn, or you won't, and you'll face the consequences of that choice. But either way, it will be your choice, not my responsibility. I could hear voices in the background again, more urgent now. Dave asking what was happening, Emma wondering why her mother was crying. The sounds of a family crisis beginning to unfold. Mom, I need to go. Dave is asking questions and the kids are upset and I need to figure out what to tell them. Tell them the truth, Rebecca. Tell them that their grandmother has been helping support their lifestyle for years, and that help is ending because their mother needs to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet. I can't tell them that. Then tell them whatever you think is appropriate. But don't lie to them the way you lied to me. Children deserve better than that. Mom, please. Rebecca, I love you. I have always loved you, and I always will love you. But I can't continue to sacrifice my own dignity to enable your dependence. When you're ready to have a real relationship with me, one based on mutual respect rather than financial convenience, call me. Until then, you have 30 days to figure out how to manage your own life. I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone completely. There would be more calls, probably many more, as Rebecca and Dave realized the full scope of their financial situation and began to panic about how to manage without my support. But those were their problems to solve, not mine. For the first time in 15 years, I had chosen my own dignity over my daughter's comfort. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. It also felt like the beginning of discovering who Anna Washington could be when she stopped trying, to be who everyone else needed her to be. 3 weeks passed before I heard from Rebecca again. 3 weeks during which I transformed my life in ways I hadn't imagined possible when I first walked away from Gate 42. I moved into the penthouse at Millennium Towers, filling it with furniture that reflected my actual taste rather than what I thought was appropriate for a modest widow. I bought artwork that made me smile, wines that pleased my palate, and books that challenged my intellect rather than simply passing time. Most importantly, I resumed my full partnership role at Morrison Financial. The Hartwell Group negotiations proved to be exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes business challenge that reminded me why I had loved this work in the first place. David Morrison confided that my presence at the negotiating table had been the deciding factor in closing the deal. Anna, I don't know what prompted you to step back into full partnership mode, but I'm grateful, he said as we signed the final merger documents. The Hartwell people specifically mentioned your strategic insights as a key factor in their decision to move forward. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my new home office when my doorman called to announce that I had visitors. Rebecca and Dave were downstairs asking to come up. I hadn't expected them to find my new address so quickly, but then again, I hadn't made any particular effort to hide it. "Send them up, Thomas," I told the doorman. I had been wondering when this conversation would happen, and I was curious to see what approach they had decided to take. When the elevator doors opened directly into my penthouse foyer, I could see the shock on both their faces. Rebecca's eyes widened as she took in the marble floors, the crystal chandelier, the original oil paintings on the walls. Dave stood behind her, looking like a man who was beginning to understand that he had fundamentally misunderstood his mother-in-law. "Hello, Rebecca. Dave." I gestured toward the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Please come in. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Wine? I have an excellent Bordeaux that I think you might enjoy." Rebecca walked slowly into the living room, her head turning to take in details. The silk upholstery on the furniture, the Persian rug that had cost more than most people's cars, the view that commanded a premium even in this expensive building. "Mom, this place is incredible," she said, settling carefully onto the edge of the sofa as if she were afraid to disturb anything. "When did you move here? How long have you had this apartment?" "I closed on it 2 weeks ago. I needed a space that better reflected who I actually am rather than who I've been pretending to be." Dave remained standing, his engineering mind clearly trying to calculate the cost of what he was seeing. "Anna, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how can you afford this? This building, this apartment, it's got to be worth millions." "It is worth millions, Dave. I paid cash for it." "But how is that possible? I mean, we've always thought you were living on Walter's pension and Social Security." I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into my favorite chair, the one positioned to take full advantage of the view. "You thought that because I allowed you to think it. It was easier than explaining the reality of my financial situation." Rebecca leaned forward, her carefully composed facade beginning to crack. "Mom, I don't understand any of this. 3 weeks ago, you were living in that little house in the suburbs, driving a 10-year-old Honda, shopping at discount stores. Now you're living like some kind of millionaire. What's really going on?" "What's going on is that I stopped hiding my actual circumstances to protect your feelings. Rebecca, I've been wealthy for decades. The modest lifestyle was a choice, not a necessity. But why? Why would you live like that if you didn't have to?" I considered how much to reveal, how deep to go into the psychology of my choices. "Because I wanted you to feel successful in your own right. I thought that if you knew the extent of my resources, you would never develop confidence in your own abilities. I thought I was giving you the gift of independence." Dave sat down heavily beside Rebecca, running his hands through his hair. "Anna, when you say wealthy, what exactly are we talking about?" "We're talking about assets in the tens of millions. Dave. We're talking about a business portfolio that generates more income in a month than both of your annual salaries combined. We're talking about the kind of wealth that makes the money I've been giving you over the years essentially pocket change." Rebecca's face had gone pale. "Tens of millions? Mom, that's impossible. People don't just hide that kind of money." "They do when they have good reasons. And I thought I had good reasons for 15 years. "What kind of reasons?" I walked to the window, looking out over the city where I had built my fortune from nothing. "After your father died, I realized that I had 2 choices. I could live my life fully, using my resources to do the things I wanted to do, go the places I wanted to go, be the person I had worked so hard to become. Or I could focus entirely on being your mother and grandmother, making sure you felt supported and loved and never had to worry about anything." "So you chose us," Rebecca said quietly. "I chose a version of myself that I thought would be better for you. I stepped back from active involvement in my business. I moved to a modest house in your neighborhood. I dressed down, drove a simple car, lived a simple life. I made myself small so you could feel big. Mom, we never asked you to do that. You didn't ask because you never knew there was an alternative. You assumed that the woman you saw was all there was to see. Dave was still processing, his analytical mind working through the implications. But Anna, if you have this kind of money, why did you stop supporting us? If it's just pocket change to you, like you said, then why cut us off? It was a logical question from a man who thought in terms of problems and solutions, costs and benefits. But it revealed exactly the kind of thinking that had led to this crisis in the first place. Dave, imagine that you had a friend who only called you when he needed to borrow money. Every conversation was about what he needed, what crisis he was facing, what you could do to help him. He never asked about your life, never showed interest in your problems, never offered support when you needed it. How long would you continue that friendship? That's different. We're family. Family should mean the relationship matters more, not less. Family should mean treating each other with greater respect and consideration, not taking each other for granted because you assume the connection is permanent. Rebecca had been unusually quiet, but now she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mom, are you saying that our entire relationship has just been me using you for money? I'm saying that somewhere along the way, our relationship became transactional rather than emotional. You called when you needed something. You visited when you wanted babysitting. You included me in plans when it was convenient and excluded me when it wasn't. That's not how I see it. How do you see it, Rebecca? She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was smaller than I had heard it since. She was a child. I see it as having a mother who was always there for me, who always said yes when I needed help, who made my life easier and better and more secure. And how did you show appreciation for that mother? I don't know. I thought you knew how grateful I was. How would I know that? When did you tell me? When did you do something for me that wasn't prompted by a birthday or holiday? When did you make my life easier, or better, or more secure? Rebecca started to answer, then stopped. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable for all of us. I can't think of anything, she finally admitted. That's the problem, sweetheart. For years I've been giving and you've been taking, and we both pretended that was a healthy relationship. Dave cleared his throat. Anna, I think Rebecca is trying to say that we didn't realize the extent of what you were doing for us. If we had understood how much you were sacrificing. I wasn't sacrificing anything, Dave. That's what you're not understanding. The money I gave you didn't require sacrifice on my part. I have more than enough to live exactly as I choose while still being generous with my family. Then why stop? If it didn't hurt you financially, why not continue? Because it was hurting me emotionally. Because being treated like a convenient resource instead of a beloved family member was destroying my sense of self-worth. Because I realized that I was enabling Rebecca to treat me poorly by always being available no matter how inconsiderately she behaved. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I never meant to treat you poorly. I love you. You have to know that I love you. I know you love the version of me that serves your needs. But do you love me enough to respect me? Do you love me enough to consider my feelings before you make decisions that affect me? Do you love me enough to value my company even when you don't need my help? Of course I do. Really? Then why haven't you called me once in the past 3 weeks just to see how I'm doing? Why haven't you asked about this major life change I've obviously gone through? Why is this the first time you've sought me out since I stopped sending money? Because I was angry, Rebecca said, and there was a flash of the honesty I had been hoping to see. I was angry and confused, and I didn't understand why you were doing this to us. To you? Rebecca, what exactly have I done to you? You've put our financial security at risk. You've forced us to make difficult choices about our lifestyle. You've created stress and uncertainty for Emma and Michael. I've stopped enabling your dependence on me. Everything else is a choice you and Dave are making about how to respond to that change. Dave leaned forward. Anna, we've been trying to manage without your support, but it's been really difficult. Our mortgage payment alone is more than we can handle on our salaries, and with the kids' school expenses and everything else. Have you considered selling the house? Selling the house? Rebecca looked shocked. We can't sell the house. The kids are settled in their school district. This is their home. It's a home you can't afford without my subsidies. That makes it the wrong home for your actual financial situation. But if we sell, where would we go? Everything in a decent school district is expensive. Then maybe Emma and Michael need to attend public school instead of private school. Maybe you need to live in a smaller house or a different neighborhood. Maybe you need to make the kinds of compromises that most families make when they live within their actual means. You're talking about completely changing our lives, Dave said. I'm talking about you living your actual lives instead of the artificially enhanced version that my money made possible. Rebecca stood up suddenly, pacing to the window. This is insane. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, and you're forcing us to consider selling our home and moving our children to different schools because of some point you're trying to make. Well, what point do you think I'm trying to make? That we took you for granted, that we didn't appreciate you enough. Fine, you're right. We should have been more grateful. We should have acknowledged your help more often. But does that really justify destroying our financial stability? Rebecca, your financial stability was never real. It was an illusion created by my money. What I'm doing is forcing you to build actual financial stability based on your own resources and choices. But why now? Why not give us time to adjust gradually? Why not work with us to create a plan that doesn't involve such drastic changes? Because you never would have made those changes if you had a choice. As long as my money was available, you would have continued to depend on it rather than learning to manage without it. Dave stood up as well, moving to stand beside Rebecca. Anna, I understand that you're upset about the airport situation. I get that Rebecca handled that badly, but this seems like such an extreme response to what was essentially a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Dave, your wife looked me in the eye and lied to me about why I couldn't join your family vacation. Then she walked away and left, me standing alone at the airport gate while she boarded a plane to Costa Rica. In what world is that a misunderstanding? She was trying to protect your feelings. She was trying to avoid having an uncomfortable conversation about not wanting me there. There's a difference. Rebecca turned back to face me, and I could see desperation beginning to replace the anger in her expression. Mom, what do you want from us? Tell me exactly what you want us to do, and we'll do it. I want you to take responsibility for your own lives. I want you to make financial decisions based on what you can actually afford rather than what you hope I'll help you afford. I want you to understand that I'm a person with feelings that can be hurt, not just a resource to be managed. And if we do all that, you'll help us financially again? Rebecca, you're still not understanding. This isn't about earning your way back into my financial support. This is about you learning to live without it. But that's not fair to Emma and Michael. They're innocent in all this. You're right. They are innocent, which is why their parents need to take responsibility for providing them with a stable, sustainable lifestyle instead of depending on their grandmother to make up the difference. So you're just going to abandon your grandchildren because you're angry with us? The accusation hit harder than I had expected, partly because there was just enough truth in it to sting. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm still their grandmother, and I still love them deeply, but I'm not responsible for funding their lifestyle. What's the difference? If they have to change schools, if we have to move to a smaller house in a worse neighborhood, if their lives become more difficult because you've cut off support, how is that not abandonment? Because their lives don't have to become more difficult. You and Dave both have good jobs and college educations. You're perfectly capable of providing a good life for your children without my help. You might have to make different choices, but that doesn't mean worse choices. Easy for you to say when you're living in a penthouse. I'm living in a penthouse because I earned the money to afford it, just like you can earn the money to afford whatever lifestyle you choose to work. 4. Dave was quiet for a moment, then asked, Anna, can I ask you something directly? Of course. Do you want to have a relationship with us? With Emma and Michael? Or are you writing us off completely? It was the first question that suggested he might be beginning to understand the real issue. I very much want to have a relationship with all of you, but it needs to be a different kind of relationship than what we've had before. What do you mean? I mean a relationship where Rebecca calls me because she wants to talk to me, not because she needs something from me. Where I'm invited to events because you enjoy my company, not because you need a babysitter. Where my feelings and preferences are considered when family plans are being made. And you think we can have that kind of relationship while you're letting us struggle financially? I think the financial struggle might be exactly what forces us to build that kind of relationship. As long as you see me primarily as a source of money, we can't have a genuine emotional connection. Rebecca came back to sit down, her composure finally completely cracking. Mom, I'm scared. I'm scared about the money, yes, but I'm also scared about losing you. I don't know how to be your daughter if I can't count on you to help us when we need it. Then you'll learn, just like you learned how to be a mother when Emma was born, and how to be a wife when you married Dave, and how to be a professional when you started your career. You'll figure out how to be my daughter in a way that doesn't require me to diminish myself to support you. What if I can't? What if I'm not capable of being the kind of daughter you want me to be? Then we'll both have to live with that reality. But Rebecca, the alternative is for me to continue being someone I'm not in order to maintain a relationship that's built on you taking advantage of my willingness to sacrifice my own identity for your comfort. I never asked you to sacrifice your identity. You didn't ask because you never noticed that I had an identity beyond being your mother and your children's grandmother. Dave was looking back and forth between us, clearly struggling to understand the emotional complexity of what was happening. Anna, from a practical standpoint, what happens now? Are we supposed to just figure everything out on our own? That's exactly what you're supposed to do. You're grown adults with successful careers. The fact that you've been depending on an elderly woman to subsidize your lifestyle is something you should be embarrassed about, not something you should be fighting to continue. But the transition will be exactly as difficult as you choose to make it. You can sell the house and move somewhere more affordable. You can transfer the children to public schools that are probably just as good as the private school they're attending now. You can buy used cars instead of new ones, cook at home instead of eating out, vacation locally instead of internationally. Millions of families live good lives within those constraints. Or, Rebecca asked, or you can find ways to increase your income to support the lifestyle you want. Dave, you're a talented engineer. There are consulting opportunities, freelance projects, higher-paying positions at other companies. Rebecca, you're a skilled marketing professional. You could start your own consulting business, take on additional clients, pursue promotions. That would increase your salary. You're saying we should work more to maintain our standard of living instead of accepting your help? I'm saying you should work for whatever standard of living you want rather than expecting me to provide it for you. Rebecca was quiet for a long time, staring out at the view from my windows. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful rather than defensive. Mom, can I ask you something? If you had this money all along, if you were capable of living like this, why did you choose to live so modestly? What did you get out of making yourself smaller? I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was teaching you values about living within your means and not being materialistic. I thought I was helping you feel independent and successful. But you were lying to us about who you really were. Yes, I was. And that was a mistake. I should have been honest about my capabilities and resources from the beginning. I should have let you see the real me instead of the version I thought would be better for you. Why didn't you? I considered the question carefully, because the answer went to the heart of everything that had gone wrong between us. Because I was afraid that if you knew how capable and successful I really was, you would feel diminished by comparison. I was afraid that you would always see yourself as falling short of what I had accomplished. So you made yourself fall short instead. Yes, and in doing so, I taught you to see me as less than I actually am, which made it easier for you to dismiss me, to take me for granted, to treat me as if my feelings didn't matter. Dave was nodding slowly. So when Rebecca left you at the airport, it wasn't just about that one incident. It was about years of her not seeing you as an equal. It was about years of me not allowing her to see me as an equal, and her becoming comfortable with treating me as if I weren't one. Rebecca looked up at me with something that might have been understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. Mom, I think I'm starting to see what you mean, but I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to have a relationship with you where I'm not constantly worried about money, and you're not constantly feeling unappreciated. We'll have to learn together. But the first step is for you to accept that the financial arrangement we had before is over permanently. Not because I don't love you, but because I love you too much to continue enabling you to treat me poorly. And the second step? The second step is for you to figure out how to manage your own life while building a relationship with me that's based on something other than what I can do for you. Rebecca stood up and walked over to where I was, sitting. For the first time since she had arrived, she looked directly into my eyes for more than a few seconds. Mom, I owe you an apology. Not just for the airport, but for years of taking you for granted. For not seeing you as the remarkable woman you obviously are. For assuming that your only purpose was to support my life instead of living your own. Thank you. That means more to me than you know. But I also need you to understand something. This is going to be really hard for us. Not just financially, but emotionally. Learning to see you differently, learning to relate to you differently, it's going to take time. I understand that, and I'm willing to be patient as long as I can see that you're making a genuine effort. What would a genuine effort look like to you? It would look like you calling me sometimes just to talk, not because you need something. It would look like you including me in family events because you want me there, not because you need help with the children. It would look like you asking about my life, my interests, my experiences. And it would look like us managing our own finances without depending on you. Yes, because as long as you're financially dependent on me, there will always be a power imbalance that makes a genuine relationship impossible. Dave stood up as well. Anna, I want to apologize too. I've been just as guilty as Rebecca of taking your generosity for granted. I should have questioned how we could afford our lifestyle. I should have insisted that we live within our actual means instead of accepting your subsidies as if they were our right. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. Rebecca reached for my hands, and I let her take them. Mom, will you be patient with us while we figure this out? Will you still be my mother even if I'm not very good at being your daughter for a while? Rebecca, I will always be your mother, but I won't always be your safety net. You're going to have to learn the difference. I think I'm beginning to understand that difference. Good, because understanding it is the first step toward building the kind of relationship we should have had all along. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca paused at the door. Mom, can I ask you one more thing? Of course. When you boarded that private jet to Chicago, when you went to see your lawyer, were you planning this? Had you already decided to cut us off? I thought about that morning at the airport, about the rage and hurt and determination that had driven me to take action I never would have considered before. I was planning to remind you that I'm not someone who can be discarded without consequences. What exactly that would mean, I wasn't sure until I started doing it. And now? Do you regret it? I regret that it was necessary. But I don't regret doing it. For the first time in years, Rebecca, I feel like myself again. And that's worth any amount of temporary discomfort for all of us. After they left, I stood at my window looking out over the city lights, thinking about the conversation and what it might mean for our future. Rebecca and Dave were going to struggle, financially and emotionally, as they adjusted to their new reality. Emma and Michael were going to have questions about why their lives were changing. But for the first time since Walter died, I felt like I was living my own life instead of a carefully constructed performance designed to make everyone else comfortable. It was a good feeling. It was a feeling worth fighting for. 6 months had passed since that confrontation in my penthouse, and the transformation in all our lives had been more dramatic than any of us could have anticipated. Rebecca and Dave had indeed sold their house, moving to a charming but modest 3-bedroom ranch in a neighborhood with excellent public schools. Emma and Michael had adjusted to their new school with the resilience that children possess when their parents handle transitions with honesty and confidence. The most surprising change, however, had been in Rebecca herself. Without the financial safety net I had provided for so many years, she had discovered reserves of creativity and determination that I think had surprised even her. She had started her own marketing consultancy, working from a small office she had set up in their new home spare bedroom. Her client base was growing steadily, and for the first time in her adult life, she was earning enough to support her family's lifestyle without anyone else's help. I was reviewing the latest Morrison Financial quarterly reports when my assistant buzzed to inform me that Rebecca was here for our scheduled lunch. We had been meeting every other Tuesday for the past 3 months, a tradition that had started tentatively, but had evolved into something I genuinely looked forward to. "Send her up, please," I said, setting aside the financial documents and moving to the kitchen to check on the salads I had prepared. When the elevator opened, Rebecca stepped out carrying a small wrapped package and wearing the kind of genuine smile I hadn't seen from her in years. She looked different, too, more confident somehow, as if she had finally grown into her own skin. "Mom, this place still takes my breath away," she said, giving me a warm hug that lasted longer than our perfunctory embraces used to. "I brought you something." "You didn't need to bring me anything, sweetheart. Your company is gift enough." "I wanted to. It's not expensive or fancy, but I thought you might like it." I unwrapped the package to find a small ceramic vase, clearly handmade, with an elegant blue glaze that caught the light beautifully. "Rebecca, this is lovely. Where did you find it?" "I didn't find it. I made it. I've been taking a pottery class on Saturday mornings. It's something I've always wanted to try, but I never seemed to have the time before." I turned the vase over in my hands, admiring the craftsmanship and the care that had obviously gone into creating it. "You made this?" "Rebecca, this is beautiful. I had no idea you were interested in pottery." Neither did I, really. But when we moved and I was setting up my home office, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I actually had time to explore things that interested me rather than just things that needed to be done. We settled at my dining table with the salads and the bottle of Sauvignon Blanc that had become our tradition for these lunches. The conversation flowed easily, covering Rebecca's business challenges, Emma's adjustment to being on the soccer team at her new school, Michael's fascination with his science teacher, and Dave's recent promotion to senior engineer. "Mom, can I tell you something that might sound strange?" Rebecca asked as we finished eating. "Of course. I'm happier now than I've been in years. I know that sounds crazy, given everything that's changed, but it's true." "It doesn't sound crazy at all. Why do you think that is?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "I think it's because for the first time since college, I feel like I'm living my own life instead of a life that was being subsidized by someone else. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. There's a different kind of satisfaction that comes from achieving something entirely through your own efforts. I never understood that before. When you were helping us financially, I thought I was grateful. But I realize now that part of me always felt diminished by it. Like I wasn't quite a real adult because I couldn't manage without help. Why didn't you ever say anything about feeling that way? Because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. And because it was easier to take the help than to face the possibility that I might not be as successful as I wanted to believe I was. I refilled our wine glasses, thinking about how much courage it must have taken for Rebecca to admit that. Do you resent me for letting you feel that way for so long? I did at first. But now I understand that you were trying to protect me from struggling, and I was choosing to let you do it instead of insisting on my independence. We were both making choices that felt loving at the time, but were actually undermining our relationship. And now? Now I call you because I want to talk to you, not because I need something from you. Now when we spend time together, it's because we enjoy each other's company. Now when you give advice, I can actually hear it instead of just waiting for you to solve my problems for me. After lunch, we moved to the living room with our coffee, and Rebecca asked the question I had been expecting for weeks. Mom, I need to know something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Always. Are you lonely? I know you have your work and your social activities, but do you miss having family around more often? Do you regret the way things have changed between us? It was a fair question, and one I had been asking myself with increasing frequency. I miss some things about the way we used to interact. I miss feeling needed by you, if I'm being honest, but I don't miss feeling taken for granted. And I don't miss the version of myself that I had to be to maintain that relationship. What do you miss about feeling needed? There's something deeply satisfying about being able to solve problems for people you love. When you called with a crisis and I could write a check or make a phone call and fix things for you, it made me feel useful, valuable, important in your life. But you are important in my life. More important now than you were before, I think. How so? Before, you were important because of what you could do for me. Now you're important because of who you are. I've learned more about you in the past 6 months than I learned in the previous 10 years. What have you learned? Rebecca smiled. I've learned that my mother is brilliant at business strategy in ways I never imagined. I've learned that you have opinions about art and literature and politics that are thoughtful and informed. I've learned that you're funny in a dry, sophisticated way that I never noticed before. I've learned that you're much stronger and more independent than I ever gave you credit for. What else? I've learned that you've been protecting me from seeing your real personality because you thought I needed a different kind of mother. But Mom, the mother I needed was exactly who you really are. Strong, successful, confident, capable. I needed to see that women could be all those things. I felt tears starting to form, which surprised me. These monthly lunches had become emotional, in ways I hadn't expected. Rebecca, that means more to me than you know. There's something else I've learned. What's that? I've learned that you made sacrifices for me that went far beyond money. You sacrificed showing me who you really were because you thought it would be better for me. That's a much bigger gift than any financial support you ever provided. Do you think it was the right choice? I think it was a choice that came from love, but no, I don't think it was the right choice. I think I would have been better off seeing my mother as the successful, powerful woman she actually is instead of the diminished version you presented to me. Why? Because it would have shown me what was possible for women. Because it would have given me a role model for how to be successful while still being a loving mother. Because it would have taught me that I didn't need to choose between being professionally accomplished and being a good family member. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city where I had built my career and my fortune. Rebecca, I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you're going to react to it. What is it? I've been thinking about what I want to do with my money when I die. My estate, my business interests, all of it. Mom, you don't need to think about that for years yet. You're healthy and vital, and I'm 74 years old, sweetheart. It's responsible to have these conversations now, while we can discuss them openly. Rebecca joined me at the window. Okay, what have you been thinking? I've been thinking that the traditional approach of leaving everything to you and your family might not be the best choice for any of us. Ma, what do you mean? I mean that inheriting a large fortune might undermine all the progress you've made in building your own independence and success. It might put you right back into the position of having your lifestyle subsidized by my money. Rebecca was quiet for a long time. What are you considering instead? I'm considering leaving the bulk of my estate to charitable causes that matter to me. Education, business development for women, financial literacy programs, things that would use my money to help other people build the kind of independence and success that you're building for yourself now. And what would you leave to us? Enough to provide security without providing dependence. Enough to enhance your lives without replacing your own efforts. College funds for Emma and Michael that would give them opportunities without removing the need for them to work for what they want. How do you feel about that idea? Honestly, relieved. For years, I worried that leaving you a large inheritance would be doing you a disservice, just like giving you ongoing financial support turned out to be a disservice. This way, I can use my money to make a positive impact in the world while ensuring that you continue to live your own life rather than a life made possible by my wealth. Rebecca turned to face me directly. Mom, I have something to confess. What's that? I've been hoping you would make exactly that choice. Really? Yes. Over the past few months, as I've been building my business and watching Dave advance in his career and seeing the kids thrive in their new school, I've realized that the best thing you ever did for us was to force us to stand on our own feet. The idea of going back to being dependent on your money, even after you're gone, feels like a step backward. You wouldn't resent being left out of a large inheritance? I would feel honored to be the daughter of a woman who used her wealth to make the world better, rather than just making her family richer. I felt something settle in my chest, a sense of rightness that I hadn't experienced in years. Rebecca, there's something else I want to discuss with you. What? I want to involve you in some of my charitable work, not as someone who benefits from my money, but as someone who helps me decide how to use it effectively. What kind of involvement? I'm planning to establish a foundation focused on helping women start their own businesses. I want someone with your marketing expertise and your recent experience of building a company from scratch to help me design the programs. Rebecca's eyes lit up with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen from her since she was a child being offered a special treat. Mom, that sounds incredible. I would love to be involved in something like that. It would be real work, with real responsibilities. I'd pay you a consulting fee for your time and expertise, just like I would any other professional I hired for the project. That makes it even better. I want to earn whatever role I have in your life, including any professional collaboration. We spent the next hour discussing ideas for the foundation, and I was impressed by Rebecca's insights and suggestions. She had developed a sophistication in her thinking about business and marketing that I hadn't fully appreciated before. More importantly, she approached the conversation as an equal participant, rather than as someone seeking my approval or trying to please me. As our afternoon together was winding down, Rebecca asked one more question that surprised me. Mom, do you think Dad would be proud of the choices we've both made this year? I considered the question carefully. Walter had known both versions of me, the successful businesswoman and the devoted mother, and he had loved me in both roles. I think he would be proud that we finally found a way to be honest with each other about who we really are. I think he would be proud that you've built a successful business on your own terms. And I think he would be proud that I finally stopped hiding my accomplishments to make other people comfortable. I miss him. So do I. Every day. Do you think he would understand why you had to cut us off financially? I think he would understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to force them to discover their own strength. As Rebecca prepared to leave, she hugged me with the kind of warmth and genuine affection that had been missing from our relationship for years. Mom, I want you to know that this has been the best year of my adult life, even though it started as one of the worst days. Mine too, sweetheart. Really? Really? For the first time since your father died, I feel like I'm living my own life instead of just supporting other people's lives. For the first time in years, I feel like the person I worked so hard to become. After Rebecca left, I sat in my living room watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and orange. The woman who had been abandoned at Gate 42 6 months, Ego felt like someone from another lifetime. That woman had been diminished, dismissed, taken for granted by the people she loved most. This woman, the woman I had become by reclaiming my identity and my dignity, was whole again. The irony wasn't lost on me that Rebecca's moment of ultimate disrespect had been exactly the catalyst I needed to remember who Anna Washington really was. By forcing me to confront how small I had made myself, she had inadvertently given me the motivation to become large again. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed Emma's name. "Hi, Grandma Anna," came her cheerful 12-year-old voice. "I wanted to call and tell you about my science project. We're studying genetics, and I wrote about how traits get passed down through families." "That sounds fascinating, sweetheart. What did you discover?" "I discovered that I get my love of math from you because Mom told me that you're really good at business, which uses a lot of math. And I get my artistic side from Mom because she's been making pottery, and it's really beautiful. Those are wonderful traits to inherit." "Grandma Anna, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happier now that we live in the smaller house and go to public school?" The directness of the question caught me off guard, but I realized that Emma deserved an honest answer. "I'm happier that your family is taking care of themselves, and that your mom and dad are proud of what they've accomplished. Does that make sense?" "I think so. Like it's better for us to do things ourselves than to always need help?" "Exactly like that. I think I'm happier too. My new school has a better science program, and Mom is around more now that she works from home, and Dad seems less stressed about money. Those are all wonderful things. And Grandma Anna, I like this version of you better too." "What do you mean?" "The you that lives in the pretty apartment and wears nice clothes and talks about business stuff. You seem more like yourself now. Out of the mouths of babes. If a 12-year-old could see the difference between the real me and the diminished version I had been presenting, how had I convinced myself for so long that I was protecting anyone by hiding who I really was?" "Thank you, Emma. That means a lot to me. Will you come to my science fair next month? I want to show you my project about genetics and family traits. I wouldn't miss it for anything." After we hung up, I realized that this conversation with Emma had given me something I hadn't even known I was missing. For the first time in my relationship with my grandchildren, one of them had seen me as a real person rather than just a convenient grandmother. Emma was old enough now to understand that I had a life and an identity beyond my role in her family, and she seemed genuinely interested in getting to know that person. The following Monday, I had a meeting with Jonathan Patterson to finalize the legal documents establishing the Anna Washington Foundation for Women's Business Development. As I signed the papers that would commit $10 million to helping other women achieve the kind of independence and success that Rebecca was now building for herself, I felt a deep sense of purpose that had been missing from my life for years. "Anna, "This is a remarkable thing you're doing," Jonathan said as he witnessed my signature. "This foundation is going to change a lot of lives." I hope so. But more than that, I hope it will help women understand that they don't have to choose between being successful and being loving family members. I hope it will help them see that they can be both. Is that what you learned from your experience with Rebecca? I learned that hiding your success doesn't protect anyone. It just creates false relationships based on incomplete information. I learned that the people who love you deserve to see all of who you are, not just the parts you think they can handle. That evening, I called Rebecca to tell her about the foundation documents being finalized and to ask if she wanted to schedule our first official planning meeting. "Mom, I can't tell you how excited I am about this project," she said. "I've been researching other business development programs for women, and I have so many ideas about how we can make ours different and better. I'm looking forward to hearing them." "There's something else I want to tell you. Dave and I have been talking, and we want to plan a family vacation this summer. Somewhere modest but fun, that we can afford entirely on our own." "That sounds wonderful. And we want to invite you to join us, not to help pay for it, just to be with us because we want your company." I felt tears starting again, which seemed to be happening more frequently in my conversations with Rebecca these days. "I would love that." "Really? Even though it won't be Costa Rica? Even though it might just be a week at a lake house in Wisconsin?" "Rebecca, I would rather spend a week in a cabin in Wisconsin with people who want me there than a month in the most luxurious resort in the world with people who see me as a burden." "Good, because we definitely want you there." After we hung up, I walked out onto my terrace and looked up at the stars that were just becoming visible in the darkening sky. The woman who had stood alone at Gate 42 6 months ago, dismissed, and discarded by her own daughter, could never have imagined that the story would end here. But perhaps that's the most important lesson I learned from this entire experience. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives, the moments when we feel most abandoned and hurt, are actually the moments that force us to rediscover our own strength and value. Rebecca thought she was abandoning me at that airport gate. What she actually did was force me to remember that Anna Washington was strong enough to board her own plane, successful enough to hire her own lawyer, and valuable enough to demand better treatment from the people who claimed to love her. The plot twist. In this story, wasn't that I had been secretly wealthy all along. The plot twist was that I had been secretly strong all along, and it took my daughter's moment of ultimate disrespect to remind me of that strength. Now, as I stood on my terrace looking out over the city where I had built my fortune and my reputation, I realized that the best chapters of my life were just beginning. I had a foundation to build, a relationship with my daughter to continue developing, grandchildren to mentor as their real grandmother rather than their convenient one, and a business to run as my authentic self. The woman at Gate 42 had been the end of one story. The woman on this terrace was the beginning of another, much better one, and this time, I was writing it entirely for myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.